Everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Create, Engage, Succeed show. I'm Mary Nunley with my co-host.
Amadeus Nunley.
And we have our special guest, Rennie Gabriel, here today. And if you notice in his background, it says wealthonanyincome.com, 100% of profits donated to charity, which when you do your intro, I want to know some more about that before we get into the nuts and bolts of our conversation. Rennie and I met at a mastermind a few weeks ago, and he graciously volunteered to come on our show. And I thought his topic is just so incredibly valuable because we all need money to live. And yet there are all kinds of myths about money. And even if we didn't have money, there's still barter. You're still exchanging something for something. So money is just a way of exchanging your one form of energy for another form of energy. And I'm kind of rambling here. So Rennie, why don't you introduce yourself and let everyone know a little bit about you, and we'll get into this.
Yeah, you bet. And well, probably the most important thing is that I got a late start in putting my financial house in order. The embarrassing part was I am a certified financial planner.
Wow.
And at the same time, in my coursework, there was nothing about the foundations of handling money effectively. I was taught how to deal with stocks, bonds, or help wealthy people keep their money or buy insurance, but nothing about creating wealth. And none of the foundations, not even doing a budget or a spending plan, nothing.
Wow.
And I found this is not taught to CPAs either. So the point I'm getting at is I'd had a couple divorces, had a business failure, and by age 50, I was flat broke. But what I did is I copied what wealthy people do. And within about 8 years, I had created enough wealth that I didn't have to work again the rest of my life.
That's fantastic.
So now, if I'm showing other people how to handle money powerfully and I don't need it, well, then why am I doing it? To donate the profits to charity.
That's excellent. And just what a wonderful way to not only give back, but also to teach a very useful skill. Because I do think, not just in financial planning, I think that we need to be better at teaching children about money management.
Yes.
Instead of waiting until you're adults.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know what? This is great, Mary, because I've got you and your son right here. So I'm going to I'll ask Amadeus the question first.
Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't embarrass you too badly. Mary, Amadeus, do you recall when you were of high school age that you were taught in school how to handle money effectively?
No.
Okay. Do you recall at about that same age that your mother or maybe your father might have sat down with you and taught you how to handle money effectively?
Not more than going, hey, if you want to buy something, you need to earn it.
Okay.
That was the money talk, was if you want to buy that $60 game, you should do some work to get $60.
Okay, great. Well, that's something. Some kids don't even get that. Mary, do you recall when you were in high school that either your parents sat down with you or some teacher or class taught you how to handle money effectively?
Not at all.
Exactly. That's the situation for 9 out of 10 people. There's no education in that area. So I don't know how we're expected to get it. Osmosis doesn't work.
Right.
And so I spent so many years looking for how to do this and finally found it and put it together. And that is, what allowed me to do as well as I have, is learning the foundations of how to handle money powerfully.
That's fantastic, which leads me to my first question, which is, what are some of those common money myths? Because I do think as a parent, one of those myths is my children are just going to figure it out because they're watching me. But most of the time, you're not showing your children how to balance a checkbook or here's what's coming in, here's what's going out. I know with my 2 children as a single parent raising them, it was like, no, we don't have enough money for that. Or, if we do this, then we can't do that. But I never showed them the nitty gritty because as an adult, you're just like, I don't want to show my children what's going on, but I teach him how to cook and he knows, how to cook. Why wouldn't I teach him money? So what are some of those common money myths that you run across?
Probably the biggest and the most frightening and the most damaging is what I hear from other financial gurus and CPAs. And that is, oh, pay your credit card debt off first. They'll say, well, your credit card debt is at 14, 16, 18%. And what are you going to earn if you save or invest? 2, 3, 5, 8%? I mean, look at that difference. Well, guess what? That's not what it's about.
Interesting.
Like I said, I was 50 and broke, starting over, and I had credit card debt. What I did instead was made the minimum payments, and I was only earning $5,000 a month. That's why the title is Wealth on Any Income. I'm earning $5,000 a month. I'm setting aside $500 a month. And this doesn't sound like a lot, but in 3 years, I saved up $18,000.
Wow.
That was the most money I'd ever saved up in my life. And I'm 53 years of age. That's
incredible. So let me ask a follow-up to that. Looking at Amadeus as an example, he doesn't have credit card debt per se, but he's got, but not at the levels that many adults have.
No.
But you're coming from paying down $80,000 in student loan debt. Would you take that same approach?
Absolutely. That debt does not come first. And here's what I'm getting at. So I saved up $18,000. I'm 53 years of age. And my wife had a realtor she was working with who said, there's a 3-unit building you should buy. Oh, that's great. I got $18,000. I ain't buying anything in Los Angeles.
Right.
Okay. So my wife came up and she chipped in $18,000. And the realtor said, you know what? This is such a good deal. I'm going to chip in $36,000. You'll have the full down payment. We'll buy it together, the three of us.
Wow.
So that leads to two things. One of them is, if I'd have focused on paying off my credit card debt, I wouldn't have had the $18,000 to buy the real estate. And the second thing is, wealth creation is a team sport, not a solo sport. I didn't buy it by myself. My wife and the realtor, the three of us bought it together. Oh. And literally within another 6 years, we went from that 3-unit purchase to 50 units we owned and managed.
Wow. But that's a really key point. I could see it on Am's face too. It's like the team sport, because I think most of us are taught your finances and your money management are supposed to be very private. Just like in the corporate world, nobody talks about salary because you don't want people to know. Now, having some experience in higher education at a public institute, my salary was common knowledge to anybody that wanted to look me up. And it took away some of that taboo, because just like, well, if you want to know what I make, just go to this website and look up what my salary is. And it's like, okay, so now you understand how I'm living, the lifestyle I'm living, whatever it happens to be. How do we overcome that? And how do we start thinking about money management as more of a team sport?
Recognizing the attitude wealthy people have. So if you want to stay poor, you can do the ordinary things. If you want to become wealthy, do what wealthy people do. And as an example, they talk about money. Ordinary people generally don't. I'll give you a good example. I talked about setting aside $500 a month. That comes from a 5,000-year-old concept that most people have heard of. So I'll ask you both. Have you heard of the expression, pay yourself first?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Now, Amadeus, can you explain what it means?
To my understanding of it, pay yourself first is essentially make sure you're giving yourself enough money to use and live off of first before you try and pay off or do anything else.
That's kind of close, but that ain't it.
Okay.
Mary, could you explain it?
Ooh, I was going to say similar to Amadeus, pay myself what I'm worth, and then pay off the rest of the bills.
Okay, so that's not it.
Okay.
All right. So, and that's the value of my asking this question. Ordinary people say, I've heard of it. It's not new to me. Maybe even I've done it. Here's the definition. It's the money you set aside before you pay anyone else anything. And it's the money you keep for the rest of your life that never leaves your hands except to invest and create more money.
Oh.
So when I said I set aside $500 a month, that was paying myself first, money I was going to keep for the rest of my life. And that's how I created the 18,000 that went into the real estate down payment that created value that literally, I think it was 4 years later, 5 years later, that 18,000 was worth 125,000.
Wow.
We borrowed back money. We refinanced the property. That created money to make down payments on more buildings that had deferred maintenance and were mismanaged. That once we improved, we refinanced and borrowed back to buy more apartment buildings.
So you're constantly refurbishing or replenishing, not refurbishing, replenishing
Exactly.
those stores.
That original $18,000 was worth multi-millions in 8 years.
Wow.
So what I'm getting at is that pay myself first created millions of dollars. It didn't go to pay off my credit card debt. It didn't go to the grocers. It didn't go to the plumbers. It didn't go to the banks for the mortgage payments. It went to me.
That
And
makes sense.
so here's what I'm getting at in terms of wealthy people and their thinking. Ordinary people, when they hear familiar information like pay yourself first, will say something like, I've heard it before. Okay. A wealthy person instead has a different attitude. A wealthy person asks questions when they hear familiar information, like, where would I put the money? Or when will I begin doing that? Or what should I invest in? Or how do I do it? Or who can support me with it? Those questions lead to the answers that produce results. And it doesn't matter what we're talking about. When a wealthy person hears familiar information, they ask questions instead of making statements.
Interesting. So what would your advice be for somebody just getting started? This is a new concept to them, or they're only bringing home $2,000 a month, barely making ends meet to begin with. How would you help them get started on this path?
Yeah, the magic in doing this is that when someone treats themselves like they matter, which is what you're doing when you pay yourself first, all of a sudden they're able to make more money. They see more money coming in. They find new ways to make money. Instead of, here's the difference. I had the attitude that it didn't matter how much money I made, I'd never have anything. And it didn't matter if I was making $2,000 or $3,000 a month. My wife figured out a way to spend it all, so we would just be getting by. Okay. So my third wife doesn't have that attitude. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And so until I was able to break up the conversation that it doesn't matter how much money I make, I'll never have anything, nothing was going to change. And paying myself first as though I deserved to own some of the money I was earning made all the difference. I mean, I've done this with psychologists who would say the same thing. Well, I'm earning 90,000 a year, and all the money goes out. It comes in one hand, it goes out the other. I have nothing left over to save. No, you don't look for what's left over to save. You pay yourself first. And she said, well, I don't know how I can do that. I won't have the money to cover my bills. I've heard this over and over again. And what ends up happening is her income jumped from 90,000 a year to 120,000 a year because she treated herself like she mattered.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter if it's 2,000 a month, 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. You come first and then you make more money because now the universe says, oh, you know what you're doing. We'll give you more.
Okay. So would that also apply to, for example, putting your money in an employer-sponsored 401k where you're sort of paying yourself first, it's building, or are you saying this should be something completely different?
I'm saying it should be outside of that.
Okay.
And there's two reasons for it. One, the money that goes into the 401k plan is excellent. It's before you get to spend it, but you're not consciously doing it. Your paycheck shows it's already come out. You're not taking the physical actions to change your situation. Your employer's doing it for you.
Okay. And that was what I was thinking, because it's just like when you have your taxes deducted from your paycheck, you're just looking at, here's my end of the day money that I have to do anything with. And what you're saying is having an outside investment like a 401k is a good strategy. And you should also make a conscious effort of writing that check or depositing it, and not, what it sounds like is also don't have that just automatically withdrawn from your checking account to your savings account. Physically do it. Like go to
Yes.
the bank and say, put this here.
I am opening a separate account. And when I deposit my paycheck, I will physically or mechanically or at the ATM transfer money into my Keep Forever account.
That is worth the whole conversation right there. Well, because I for years, I've always had just money automatically transfer. But again, I don't feel an attachment to it. It's like, oh yeah, that's just I'm building up my rainy day fund. It just automatically transfers. But I think that if it becomes real, in the sense of like, I'm just going to say $100 out of the ATM, and then I went to the next ATM and I put it into a different account, it's like I physically am touching this money.
Yes, you're involved in the process. And I'm glad you used the term rainy day fund, because that's separate from a Keep Forever fund. And when people pay themselves first, they usually need to start by having two separate accounts. One is you keep forever, and one is for the emergencies that crop up that you weren't planning for, like the car breaking down or the water heater breaking down or back to school clothing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So those have to be two separate accounts.
Okay. So then it would be potentially, like, I'll look at Amadeus as a youngster coming up, 401k, which is sort of an automatic, but that's a buffer.
And it's great because you've got the tax advantages. Yep.
Exactly. And then a rainy day fund that's there so that if he needs to get new tires for his car or needs a new computer or something like that. And then a third account, which is my Keep Forever. And if there's a good opportunity to invest or buy or something, I've got that money there, and I'm not going, where am I going to come up with that $10,000 down payment or whatever?
Exactly correct.
Okay.
You got it. And I found out the magic formula is if you live on 80% of your paycheck, it all works out great. 10% goes to Keep Forever. And at Amadeus's age, this works beautiful. And 10% is for unplanned spending. It's your spending account.
Interesting.
I have calculated out if someone is earning $3,000 a month, they start in their 20s and they save $300 a month, and they invest it, let's say, in some stocks or a stock fund, or they build their own little stock portfolio. And you can do that with $300 a month. That 30 years down the road, they would have an income of over $10,000 a month from the $300 a month they set aside if they never earned more money over the next 30 years.
Sounds like I need to develop an investment portfolio.
You got it.
Yeah, and
that's what I started doing at 50. I was buying individual stocks. I'd buy a share of General Motors, a share of General Electric, a share here, a share. I mean, I was setting aside $500. There wasn't much I could do.
Right. But still, you've got to start somewhere. And I would assume, and I could be wrong though, that if you're going to do this, you should get some type of guidance or advice before you just randomly start investing money on stocks.
Or... Yeah, that correct.
Okay.
I mean, I've got people who've bought cryptocurrencies that turned out well and stuff. I read books on what would be the most effective stock strategy because I wasn't all that comfortable giving my money to some company and hoping they did well with their marketing or hoping their president knew what he was doing in leading the employees. I picked companies I figured would still be around when I was dead.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But you do want to do some homework, whether it's reading books or talking to other investors or wealthy people or something. So you're not just going, oh, here, I'm going to just go buy $300 worth of, AMC stock or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Are they still in business? No,
I-
specific
well,
theaters I know closed. But
well, I think after the Redditors pushed AMC up and GameStop, they're still in business.
oh, good, good.
Yeah, they had this whole like subreddit going on with the memes pushing up some undesirable stocks and making profit companies profitable, which
Yeah,
was a risky strategy. But again, if you're, especially if you're younger and you're willing to spend a little money to take that risk,
Mhm.
then it's probably not a bad idea.
yeah. Well, I think the thing with GameStop and what Robinhood was doing, and excuse me, not Robinhood, but the participants in it, it was like, we're going to stick it to the man.
That's it. That's it.
And that's different than really investing for the future.
Right. Well, and that's why, I would say you got to do a little bit of homework. So, if you invest in when I was growing up, they called blue chip stocks. I'm
Yeah,
assuming they're still the same.
that's correct.
Companies with a very long track record that there's a chance that they may go out of business, but for the most part, they've been around for a very long time. They're pretty stable. They've weathered the ups and downs of the economy. You should be okay investing in them.
That's correct. And if they have dividends that they're paying every year or an increasing dividend payout, you've got something that's worth purchasing.
Excellent. Amadeus, I know you had a couple questions.
Yeah. So going back, I guess, a bit to when we were talking about credit cards, this is something I've heard a lot and heard various people try and tell me as I was coming up. What is like the difference between good debt and bad debt? Because that's something I hear a lot of people like, oh, that's good debt. Oh, that's bad debt. And I'm like, it's debt, right?
That's a great question because there's two kinds of debt, good debt and bad debt.
Okay.
And bad debt is consumer debt. It's like charging a meal on your credit card and then paying it off over time. I mean, 24 hours later, that meal turned to, you know what it turned to.
Yes. It's processed.
It's processed. Thank you. So paying for it a month or 2 or 3 months later, it makes no sense.
Mhm.
So that's bad. Anything you consume, an automobile is consumer debt. Meals are consumer debt. Vacations, consumer debt. Those are the things you do not want to pay off over time. That's bad debt. Good debt is the apartment building, the little 3-unit building we purchased with $72,000 down payment was financed the rest by the bank. That was good debt. The reason it was good debt is that we weren't having to make the payments out of our pocket. The tenants who paid their rent were making those payments for us. Well, I mean, not directly, it
Right.
flowed through us. But the point is, if I were to buy a piece of equipment and rent it out, and I borrowed money to buy the equipment, good debt, because I'm making payments greater than what I'm receiving. We borrowed money against our house after it was paid off at 3% and then invested it at a fixed rate of 7%. We're making 4% on the debt on our house. So there are ways of using debt and having it be good and create.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you have another question?
Yeah, so we'll go for the last one because this kind of touches on, we've already talked about paying ourselves. What would you recommend for budgeting, just kind of in general of your funds? I know you said 10% rainy day, 10% self, live off of 80%, but is there more of a breakdown that you would give for that 80% to live off of, or? Oh,
yes, there is. And I'm glad you used the word budget because I don't like that word.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, either one answer right away. What are the first 3 letters of the word diet?
DIE.
Yeah. That's not really enrolling, is it?
That is true.
And so when you hear the word budget, people think of lack and sacrifice and deprivation. What do they have to give up? So no, I don't even like the word budget. What I like to have people create instead is a spending plan. Let's talk about spending money in alignment with the goals you want to achieve. Let's talk about spending money in the areas that give you pleasure. Well, how will you even know if where you're spending it's giving you pleasure unless you ask some questions like, did I get the level of pleasure I just paid for? As an example, I would go to the grocery store and, buy groceries and come home to make food. And I didn't really enjoy the experience. I would go out to eat with my wife. We'd sit down and the server would bring us our food, or if we wanted another napkin or different silverware or iced tea or refill coffee or whatever. It was great. My wife and I would sit down and have a conversation. At home, that doesn't happen. We would be getting up and down. She'd be making something. I'd be making something. Maybe we made something together. But the point is, we're not having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I liked spending money eating out, not buying groceries. And until I asked myself, did I get the level of pleasure I just paid for? I didn't know which I preferred. And so when you're spending money in a spending plan and asking yourself questions, you can get answers that say, I want to spend more money here. I want to spend less money here. It's not about budgeting.
Okay.
That makes sense.
And I'm smiling because I'm thinking about when the kids were younger, Amadeus and his sister, and it would be like, no, we don't have money to go eat at McDonald's. However, if you want a book, I'll drop everything and we can go to the bookstore and I'll buy you a book. Because in my mind, there was more value from reading than from eating a drive-through fast food meal. And so they're like, but Mom, I thought you said you didn't have any money. Well, I don't, but I do for a book. So is that same type of, like, in my mental spending plan, books and education were more valued than a fast food meal?
Exactly. And that's what I'm getting at. When you ask yourself the questions, you get to those answers of what is it you value more. And that comes from a spending plan, not from a budget.
So last question, because we're almost out of time. What if the two people, let's say it's a husband and a wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, don't have the same feelings about that spending plan? How do you come to resolution on that?
That is so important. You have to start by understanding what are the feelings, what is the environment your spouse came from, and the way you do that. I had a book publishing company, and our first book was called Couples and Money, and it had questions in it that each person in a relationship would answer separately, and then they would come together and discuss. Like, what was your father's role in the family when you were growing up with money? What was your mother's role? Did you feel you were rich or poor? Questions like that. And based on that, when the couple would come together and speak about the environments they were raised in, now they had some common ground for understanding why the other person was acting, reacting, or whatever to what was going on with money. And in marriages, money is a control factor. And the person who has the control, being the dominant one, makes the other one subservient. And it's not a relationship of equals.
Mm-hmm.
So until people can have these kind of conversations and get on equal footing, it's really tough to have a marriage where they're willing to participate and grow together.
Wow. Powerful. Amadeus, any last questions?
I think those are the ones that I really had a pressing concern for.
Well, tell you what, let me offer something to whoever's listening.
Sure.
I've got a roadmap, a 9-step roadmap that can take someone from wherever they are to a place where they have what I call complete financial choice. I don't talk about retirement. I talk about, do you choose to work or choose not to work? Choose to travel, choose to donate your time to charities, whatever. So this roadmap is 9 steps, take someone to complete financial choice. And it's a 27-page explanation of the 9 steps.
Oh, nice.
If they go to my website, wealthonanyincome.com/TEDx, they'll hear the TED Talk where I talk about how people were programmed to be poor and stay that way. And the cure is the 9-step roadmap.
Outstanding.
Excellent.
I have a feeling that there's going to be quite a few people taking advantage of that over the next couple of days. Powerful. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's my gift. It's like, if everyone does well, if more people become wealthy, I've created more philanthropists, more charities are benefiting, and the whole world becomes transformed.
I like that. Yes, we need more people that are able to do that. I think there's a lot of people that are willing. They just don't know how to get there.
Yes. And the saddest thing is a broke philanthropist.
Yes, because you have this heart that wants to give, but you don't have the resources to be able to give.
Yep.
Wow.
And I realized I forgot to talk about the charity that's so important to me. Shelter to Soldier, which is right over here.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, Shelter to Soldier gets 100% of the profits from the work I do. And what they do is they rescue dogs that might have otherwise been euthanized and train them as service animals for soldiers that come back with PTSD or traumatic brain injuries that might have otherwise committed suicide.
Oh,
That's
wow.
a really good organization.
So they're saving 2 lives at a time, dogs that would have been euthanized and soldiers that could have committed suicide.
Oh, so Rennie, any last words for the audience before we wrap up today's show?
If a fellow who fails high school math like me can become a multimillionaire, it's available to anyone.
And on that note, I was like mind blown. This was amazing. Thank you so much. This is Mary Nunley and
Amadeus.
And our special guest, Rennie Gabriel, signing off from this week's episode of the Create, Engage, Succeed show. Rennie, you hit it on all 3 marks: create, engage, and succeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for the opportunity.
It was our pleasure.
Mm-hmm.